The old saying goes that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. In this episode, Gail talks with multimedia artist Dawn Sweitzer, who has a long history of working in the arts, designing for top fashion and home decor brands. Stay tuned to learn about Dawn's creative process, how she keeps that process fresh, and how to let go of the doubt in your work. Register now for our free financial masterclass happening on Thursday, October 3rd. Learn all of the things about your numbers that they didn't teach you in design school, and leave with a way to create a budget and read your balance sheet. Learn more and register at thepearlcollective.com/genius events.
Hello, Dawn. Welcome to Creative Genius Podcast. We are so excited to have you on today.
Hi, Gail. Thanks for having me.
Well,
I'm thrilled to be here.
it's a pleasure having you. And I understand you are a virgin on podcasts, which is awesome. I think it is great to have somebody who's brand new to it. But you're such a natural. I think it's going to be a lot of fun today. We had the pleasure of visiting your studio at High Point in North Carolina at the most recent market. And we really appreciated your generous hospitality and seeing your space and your whole process. How did you find your path to becoming a multimedia creative? Because I think that's kind of what you are.
As far back as I can remember, I was always a creative person or appreciated the creative process. And after I had traveled a while and I came back to the States, I'd lived out of the country for about 5 years. I came back to the States, and that's when I was trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And I started a company called Notre Monde, which was an accessory company. Started out with trays, mirrors, accessories, and then morphed into furniture. And while I was starting that company, to supplement my income, I would paint murals and facilitate my income with painting murals and stuff. So I started back in the early 90s or mid 90s when I started, and that was it all sort of started with Notre Monde, my accessory company.
Well, and you were so kind to show us your process for thinking about how you develop your ideas. And we're going to get into that in a second. But I'm just really curious, why High Point? High Point is not a place that one would think would be an artist area.
Destination. Well, that's a funny story. So, I'd always come to High Point with my accessory company, Notre Monde, twice a year.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
They have the High Point Furniture Market. And then I met someone, another artist, and he became my partner, and he was living here at the time. And so I decided that I would move here. And that's what brought me here was that relationship. And I found this beautiful studio space, which was an old warehouse, an old mattress factory. It's about 18,000 square feet. And so I found this great space, and it sort of blew the doors open for creativity and me to explore different, categories and things. And so I started, when I came to High Point, that's when I really started to explore different avenues outside of my company, Notre Monde.
Mm-hmm. What brands do you design for?
So I designed for several different brands. I designed for Banana Republic. I designed for Our House Furniture. I do a lot of art for Crate and Barrel, Anthropologie. I've also designed in the past for, companies like Mitchell Gold, which is no longer existing, but that was in the past. But also on a global level, I worked with Harrods in London and higher end brands there. Mm-hmm. And so I've worked with quite a few different brands. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's so fun to see some of the projects. We had that chance to wander around and see some of the things you were working on. It was really exciting. Did they find you or did you find them?
Well, it was kind of both. I've been in this industry for so long that, you know, when you're working in an industry like this, it's really, one of the important things is about creating relationships with people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, in this industry, there can be a lot of movement with buyers and, designers and creators and CEOs and things like that. And I've always, and I'm very proud of the fact that I've always had wonderful relationships with people. And so, we sort of knew each other in the industry. And yeah, so they would seek me out for my aesthetic and, integrity in the industry. And I also, one thing that I think that I'm good at is understanding the aesthetic of each company, as they're all different, right? And maintaining that
Mm-hmm.
aesthetic. And I think there's a mutual respect, working with buyers and collaborating with other creatives when you're working with larger brands.
Mm. Do you work with interior designers directly on their projects?
I do. I love
I love
working
that.
with, yeah, me too. I love collaborating. I love, and I also work with their clients as well, and they're,
Mm-hmm.
through them, it really is a collaboration when we're doing, when I'm doing commissions and stuff, because I love the fact that not only the designer, but the client who's living with the artwork or the textile or the mural, they help collaborate and create, they're part of that creative process,
Mm.
which I think is wonderful. So it's not only that, I help them understand it. So when, they're living with the art or, that bespoke piece, they're part of that story.
Mm-hmm. What type of work is most appealing to you?
Gosh, see, the truth is that I'm discovering different techniques all the time.
Mm.
I don't just work in one medium.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I find fascinating is, being a painter and an artist and a creative, but also seeing how that translates throughout, different categories. Whether it is, rugs or tabletop or, bedding,
Mm-hmm.
or a wall mural or, because really when you look at what you're surrounded by, it's designed, it's
Mm-hmm.
touched by whether it's a glass or, a table, a chair, whatever. Um, so I like to work in different mediums, and I like to discover how, it usually starts with a painting or a mood board to get
Mm-hmm.
a vibe and an idea down. And I start with a muse.
Mm-hmm.
So she's always this woman who, well, is my muse and inspires me. And I sort of live vicariously through her. Like, what would she wear? Where would she travel? What does her house look like? What does she eat? What music does she listen to? So that's where it starts when I start creating. And then I
Mm.
see how it translates throughout, whatever it is I'm designing.
So you might say she's your alter ego while you're working?
Yeah,
How
probably.
interesting.
Yeah, I can
I
be,
love that.
yeah, I can be from, South Africa. I can be from Indonesia. I could be, all over the world. Because what really inspires me ultimately is the beautiful cultures, on a global
Mhm.
level. That really is something that I value.
Do you ever get stuck in your process? Do you find that you might start on a project and all of a sudden you don't know where you want to go with it?
All the time. All
Okay.
the time. Yeah, and part of it, I think that's part of the process of a creative. I think
Mm.
you have to get stuck in order to sort of appreciate what it is that you're trying to do or what you're trying to move through. Because I feel like every time I get stuck, it might not be the most pleasant feeling when you're in it, but as you move through it, you know, you, and if you're open to moving through it, you're constantly learning. Like, I feel like I have to pivot. I have to move. I have to rethink. Sometimes I have to just step away
Hmm.
and let it be for a minute, and then I'll revisit it. But there are many times where I have an idea in my head and it's not translating the way it did in my head, on canvas or fabric or whatever, and I have to rethink it. And inevitably what happens is, something comes up that makes it more interesting.
Mm.
Whether it's the dyeing process, or the way the colors melded together, which was unexpected, or the way the paint hit the glass and it reacted with solvents or something. So I when I used to get frustrated with being stuck, now I sort of embrace it. I because it really helps me move through it, and I learn something, and I get stronger, and there's more information. So yeah,
Mm.
I think all creatives get stuck.
Well, it's interesting because you never really think about it with an artist. You just think it just flows right out of them, and it's an easy thing to do. I guess that's a
Yeah.
good time to go on vacation, isn't it?
Yeah. I was just at the beach, and I'll tell you what, full disclosure, I was feeling a little um, sort of creatively depleted. Like, I have tons of ideas, but I was like getting stuck. And so I ended up going away for like 4 days with some dear friends. And we just, I took long walks on the beach and just sort of, spent some time alone and allowed my head to clear. And it really helps, and therein lies, within that simple walk, you're surrounded by inspiration.
Hmm.
Your senses are open, you relax, you don't try to fight, making something happen. It's sort of, you allow it to happen organically, which which for me is a part of the process that I
Hmm.
embrace, because I have a lot of different projects going on at the same time. And so when I pop back and forth to different projects, it helps me sort of step away from one so I can get a little more clarity when I revisit it. But completely stepping outside of the studio from time to time is really helpful.
Hmm. Well, it sounds like it's very much like life. We all need a break every once in a while. We can't keep
Yeah.
going. Um, as the old saying goes, balls to the wall. You can't do that. It's just really impossible to continue to push yourself that hard. You have to have that space to think and also to let your right brain settle.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
How often do you communicate directly with a patron? And how often do you work just with a designer to develop your art?
So most of the time it's with the designer. And then what we do, um, what the designer will do once we get to a certain point is we all sit down together and collaborate.
Hmm.
Um, the designer sort of facilitates the initial concept, or the piece that the client responds to of mine. And then what we'll do is we'll sit down and figure out what they love about the piece, or for me, when I do their commission, because a lot of times it could be custom sizes, custom colors or finishes. And so yeah, so it's more, it starts with a designer, and then I with the patron or client. um, yeah, then I work with them as well. We all work as a team, so to speak.
Mm. Well, I'm sure it's a fun process from your
I love
side.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much about getting down to that personality of that person and making some connection with the art that you're creating so that it really reflects that person. Wouldn't that be true?
I do, and I think it's absolutely true, because we only know what we know, right? So when people come into my studio, I love to have clients come into my studio and see the process,
Hmm.
because I'm so excited about the process, and I love to share that with them, and they think differently, right? They sort of turn it inside out the way I do. They don't just see it
Hmm.
for what it is. And I think that's interesting to them, and it's one of my favorite things when I can share, the different layers and levels, because a lot of people on the outside of creativity thinks, like you said earlier, that it just happens, right? We just are in here
Right.
creating all day. And that's not the case. I mean, literally, there will be times where I'm dyeing fabric and I'm waiting for things to absorb and stuff. And I'll walk over to another area of my studio and grab some handmade paper and start, dipping it in the dye and manipulating the paper with inks and the actual dye, and see the way it responds to what type of paper it is, what brushes I use, how long I keep it in the solution. And so that's always, it's always evolving into different things. So like when you guys were here and I could share this whole process, because it's hard to wrap your head around like the layers of it.
Mm-hmm.
When you come in, you peel it back and it all makes sense. Like it may start with a painting, but then you see how that translates to paper, to fabric, to, and that's what I love about having people in my studio who appreciate that process, especially clients when they're, they want to surround themselves with beauty, but they're not quite sure, how to get to that place unless they, say, oh, I want that painting, or I want that vase, or I want that, table decor or whatever. But when you see it, then you can start saying, oh, let me add some of this finish to this. And, oh, I love that color on that, painting. So yeah, it's.
Well, I think one of the things that's very exciting about what you're doing, and when you bring somebody to your studio, essentially that becomes part of the story behind the artwork, because people will go to their home and say, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me about this art or this artist. And then if they can share that experience of getting to know you and your process, I think that is part of the just the excitement for people, is to be able to share that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I purchase something, whether my bracelet, for instance, it's a dear friend of mine who makes most of my jewelry. He made this piece as well, and all handmade beads and things. This is also Peretti, but, and so what I love is I love to tell the story of this wonderful human being who, started with nothing. And then fast forward 6 months to a year, he was designing accessories for Donna Karan and Rick Owens, and, traveling to Paris, working with other designers. And so for me, these are special pieces that I wear every day. And, it's important for me to, to appreciate the makers and the creators, of everything that I purchase as well.
That's a great story. I'm sure you can't really say that there's any number one project that was your favorite, but maybe one or two that you enjoyed working on quite a bit. Could you share about that?
Well, a couple projects. One of the projects that comes to mind was a project that I did for Katara Hotel in Dubai. So I was commissioned to do 50 pieces for all of the suites in this hotel. So we did large scale. I did a large scale. They were approximately 15 feet by 5 feet. And I worked with this wonderful company that a gentleman who used to work for Sotheby's started this company in London. And, I worked with their team of people to complete this project. And it was just an absolute pleasure. And I love, I'm fortunate enough to be able to have relationships where I can work with these hospitality projects and, these global teams of people. And so that was wonderful. I loved everything about that project. And then another project that I worked on, this was about, and I still work with them, but it was about a 10-year project, was a Belgian company called Ethnocraft. And that was, I started earlier, I said, I had the company Notre Monde. And then when I met the owners of Ethnocraft, we decided to develop a whole line of products. And it was quite different from what they were doing. And so what it did was it gave me the opportunity to just really focus on the creative side. and all the logistics and everything that I was used to doing with my other company. I've worn 50 hats. It was
Mm-hmm.
everything from, packing boxes to silk screening the actual product and paintings and doing all that, to just really, focusing on creative content, building collections, and working with their development teams.
Mm.
And so that's been a pleasure as well. I mean, they're a wonderful company, and I learned a lot throughout, the years working with them. So that, and all the bespoke projects, I have to say, like, they're kind of like your children. So I feel like I have like thousands of children out there, even if it's a cushion or a painting. I take it so personally. It's something that I really, you know, every single piece that I create, is important to me. And I want to make sure that I'm, doing it properly, and it's something that is, you know, someone else finds beautiful, and they appreciate it as much as I do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a couple
Well,
projects that
it's so fun, and all of the things that you're doing are so different. And that's what I loved about seeing your studio and seeing your process, seeing the different areas that you worked in. And I can just imagine that you shift your energy from space to space depending on what you're working on too.
oh my gosh, constantly. I am
Hmm.
literally, I should count my steps during the day, because they'd be, in the tens of thousands, because I am literally moving. Well, you've been to my studio. So
Right.
the way I have it set up intentionally is I compartmentalize, there's a dye kitchen where I do the weaving and dyeing. I have a weaver. I don't weave myself, but I design everything, and then I dye everything myself and pull all the threads and do all that. But then I have another area where I do smaller samples, whether it's aged mirror, or working on wallpaper patterns, things like that. And then I have my larger studio in the back where I do all the painting. So what's great, and then I have another segment of my studio where I put the finished pieces and start to sort of pull collections together from all of those sort of separate studio spaces. And so, yeah, I'm constantly bouncing around from space to space, because again, when I do get stuck, or I do feel that I'm at a point where I can stop for a moment and then revisit, I still am being creative. It's just in a different, different genre or different area of the studio. And so for me, I have this energy that I just, I feel like it's 24/7. I'm
Hmm.
constantly thinking, and I look at things in a different, even, on a rainy day like today, the clouds are so beautiful. I was, took my dogs outside, and I was like, wow, that's beautiful. I'm doing this whole series of um, paintings that are vistas, that are very textural. Um, they're not really some could say they're abstract, but they're very serene, very simple, but it's more about the texture and the materials that I use within the paintings. So I find myself now really looking at, cloud patterns and colors and things in nature. So yeah, it's
I want to come
really
hang out with
exciting.
you
It's
at your
constant.
studio for like a
Hang
month.
out.
I want to be there for a month and I want to play with you. You should really, if you're not doing it yet, maybe you can do some workshops and classes for that.
Yeah, so we plan. So one of the things that I'd like to do, and I is because I do so many different mediums, everything from silk screening to painting, dyeing, all these different things. I would love to, um, on a more regular basis. I've had a couple workshops here and there, but I'd love to do that on a regular basis here, because I feel like this space lends itself to that.
Hmm.
And it also, I feel like everyone that comes in this space, including myself, is so inspired,
Hmm.
because I feel like I could be having a bad day or whatever, and I walk in that door and everything just melts away, and I'm surrounded by everything I love. and I just jump in there and just really start messing around and playing around and see where it evolves from there. And so when people come into the studio, they see that it's not, I sort of bring it to earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and share what it is. And it's really just putting yourself out there and just doing
Mm-hmm.
what you love. I mean, for me, I don't care if you make safety pin lampshades, as long as you're doing something that you love. To me,
Mm-hmm.
that's just as valid and important as a creative, as creating a sculpture for a museum, or
Mm-hmm.
having a painting hang in the Met. Some people would beg to differ, but I really feel, because I'm not, I don't have a art degree. I'm self-taught. For me, not only the joy that it brings me and the freedom to be able to create, it's a really grounding, um, special place to be when you have a space, regardless of the size, that has things that inspire you in it, and then you just, you create and you start making things. I mean, psychologically, that gives so much back, because you're putting yourself out there, even if it's just you in that room. And then you are strong enough to venture out and share it with other people and get feedback. And then it just sort of creates this snowball effect, where, how many times, I mean, I know I have with friends and family and stuff, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea you were a writer, or that you sang, or that you were a painter, or that you, because we all have these massive insecurities, especially
Mm-hmm.
around creative things, because you're constantly judged. I think that's just part of our society. But when you feel solid in what you're doing and you share that with a fearlessness, I think it's contagious,
I
so.
love that. And that imposter syndrome, it affects so many different people. And
Oh,
it sounds like you've had a little bit of it because you weren't a trained
absolutely.
artist, but you were a naturally gifted person that has an eye that can bring that to the table. And to me, that's not an imposter, that's a creator. And so you are a creator. So I love it. And I love hearing that maybe you still had a little struggle with that. And I guess all creatives have to have a little struggle internally.
I think you do. I think that's
Mhm.
just part of being a human being,
Mhm.
and I think when I got past that, I had to be something for somebody else. This was years ago, but I struggled with that for a while, that I wasn't good enough, that it wasn't, I'm not Picasso, I'm not, but what, for me, it's enough. If it brings me joy and I feel good about what I'm doing, that's enough. And if people around me want to share that or be a part of it, what a beautiful thing that is. And so when I stopped doing what I do for other people and just, you know, went into myself and did it for myself, that's when the good stuff came.
Mm.
That's when it really started to evolve.
Mhm.
Because it's funny when you try to wrap, one thing that I am fascinated by and love to do as a creative is I love to meld the concept of art and commerce.
Mhm.
There are some artists that think that, oh my gosh, it's like sacrilegious. How dare you sell your artwork as a reproduction, or put artwork on a rug or a bed sheet. For me, it's all art, and, I'm not in a position to buy $100,000 original painting, but I do love this beautiful textile that was created by artisans that I can appreciate. Right. So I feel like if you just come from a place of authenticity, I think and you allow yourself to make the mistakes and fail and succeed and fail. And for me, that's where most of my successes come from, are my failures,
Mhm.
because you're just constantly putting yourself out there. So it's a pleasure for me to fail. It's not a bad word. If you're failing, you're doing something right.
I was just gonna say one of my favorite books is The Obstacle is the Way, and it really is exactly that. If you hit the obstacle, that is the direction you need to be going.
Yeah, it's true.
Mhm.
And it's true. And I think, part of struggling through that and allowing yourself grace to just be with something, if you're invested in it on some level, something good comes out of it, right? And it doesn't have to be accepted or acknowledged by anyone else. I mean, as long as you feel that you've put everything that you possibly could into whatever ever that notion is or idea, I feel that that's enough.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the reasons, like when I work with my clients, whether it's like a big box client like Banana Republic or whether it's a client where I'm doing a commission for their home, I put as much energy into the big box client as I do into the patron that I'm designing something for their home.
Mhm.
Because for me, it's about, again, having integrity and doing the best I can do for that particular opportunity.
Mm. What do you love most about what you do?
I would say I love the freedom that it gives me, and I love being able to explore and evolve and learn. I feel like I'm constantly learning, literally on a daily basis. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. Even when I'm stuck, I'm learning. Even
Mhm.
when I'm soaring, I'm embracing that. Because what goes up comes down. So
Mhm.
just hang on and ride that wave. And I love being able to experience all those emotions,
Mhm.
and in an environment that I create. It's under my terms. And I think that's one of the things that I love most. And I love
Mm.
being surrounded by beautiful things. So
And you create them and get to keep making them. That's the best part. Then you can be in love with the next thing that you create.
it's funny because when I'm creating, like I'm so into that particular thing, right? And then when it's finished and it's crated and off it goes, it's it goes to its home. And then I'm ready to, create my next child,
Mm.
and create that next, because you really look at it like that, like it's really personal. Some people are like, oh, you know, let it go. It's just this, it's just that. But for me, it's really personal. Like when I'm mixing, I could be mixing colors. I could be laying texture. It might look like texture, but it's very, very, when I'm laying things down, like it's very intentional.
Mhm.
It's thoughtful. It may look like something that's simple. I know I always hear sometimes with people who go to galleries or museums, oh, my daughter could do that. I could do that. You know, well, are you doing it? Like, so do it. That would be wonderful. But what happens is those modern pieces, the pieces that sort of engage people and make people think, you know, those are just as complicated as the realistic things that people can relate to immediately. It's for an artist to stand there and, create an abstract painting. Each drop of paint on that canvas means something to that artist. And so I have an enormous appreciation for all different types of art, whether it's something that's my aesthetic or not. So,
Mm.
so my thing is being able to create freely in a space that I've created. And that's the best part of this. And to be able to, make a living out of doing what I do. It's just,
Mhm.
it's a dream come true.
But that sounds so fabulous. And like I said, I would love to play in your paint shop.
Yay.
Well, what are three takeaways you'd like to share with us today? I know we've talked a lot about creative process. We've talked about the work that you've done, but just maybe three things that you think would be worthy of mentioning again.
Well, I would say like three takeaways is, in a creative process. I think, believe in yourself, trust your
Mhm.
instincts. It's a lot easier said than done. But once you get in there and you get a little dirty and messy and stuff, it's kind of a metaphor for life, right? We all have to get a little messy, right? And then something beautiful comes out of it. So I think trust your instincts, put yourself out there, work really hard at your vision or idea, and start somewhere, do something. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what it is. If you sit down with a little notepad and a pencil and you start doodling, or write your vision down or play a few keys on your piano or whatever it is. Like that's the takeaway that I would do. Stay true to your vision because your
Mhm.
time will come.
I love that. Well, Dawn, it's been a pleasure having you on the Creative Genius podcast, and we look forward to sharing this with our listeners. And I keep creating.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you and Pearl Collective. And I can't wait to have you guys back at the studio.
We'll be there.
Good. I'll have the rosé.
And I have to say, you do the most beautiful spread of food I have ever seen.
Oh, thank you. Well, a fun fact before we leave. So on that note, I've created an event venue. I bought some property next to my studio in this beautiful 1927 building. There's several buildings on the property. And so I'm creating, because I love to, I want to create an environment for people to walk into that's beautiful with the food, with the music, where they're surrounded, all their senses are open. And so that's another offshoot of my brand, of my creative brand, Dawn Sweitzer Studio. It's called HQ in the Gallery. And so thank you for that. I appreciate that. But that's something that we're doing. That's our vision for the near future.
We will be in touch about that because we do events all over High Point Market, every single market. So we'll be in touch about that.
Oh, I love that. That'd be wonderful.
Awesome.
Are you doing what you love? And if not, what's holding you back? Hopefully Dawn's story inspired you to incorporate more of what you love into your work, even if you're not good at it right away. Join us again for the next episode where Gail talks with Danae Branson, founder of Elite Design Assistants. Register now for our free financial masterclass happening on Thursday, October 3rd. Learn all of the things about your numbers that they didn't teach you in design school and leave with a way to create a budget and read your balance sheet. Learn more and register at thepearlcollective.com/genius events.